I think there's a rightful hesitation about removal from office, because obviously you have to consider that to some degree you're overturning an election. Doing impeachment, that's a very high standard. And so I think that's why we have called for the resignation. We hope that's what the governor does. I think that would obviously be less pain for everyone.
Goodness. Virginia's Republican House Speaker renewing calls for Governor Ralph Northam's resignation over a racist photo from the governor's yearbook page, but stopping short of calling for his impeachment. Governor Northam continues to weigh his options as calls for him to step down intensify. The Washington Post reports that Northam gathered cabinet members and staff yesterday to apologize for ongoing controversy around the racist photo and to ask for more time to clear his name. The governor urged staffers not to quit and promised he would make a decision about his fate soon, but did not give an exact time frame, according to 3 people familiar with the meeting. So that's one part of the story. Meanwhile, the state's lieutenant governor, who could become governor if Northam steps down, is denying sexually assaulting a woman inside a Boston hotel room in 2004. The allegation against Democrat Justin Fairfax was reported by the same right-wing website that posted the racist photo from Governor Ralph Northam's yearbook page, which he now claims he's not in. The Washington Post says the accuser reached out to the paper after Fairfax won election in November of 2017, and before he was inaugurated the following January, she accused him of sexually assaulting her inside his hotel room at the 2004 Democratic National Convention before he was married. Fairfax says the encounter was consensual. However, the Post says the lieutenant governor, his claim that the Washington Post found, quote, significant red flags and inconsistencies within the allegations is incorrect. The reason the paper says it didn't run the story at the time is because reporters couldn't find anyone to corroborate either version. Washington Post executive editor Marty Baron later issued a statement explaining why the paper decided to go ahead and publish the uncorroborated allegation yesterday. Quote, Lieutenant Governor Fairfax is a public official who may well rise to the position of governor. He began the morning by issuing a statement regarding allegations against him, making specific representations about Post reporting that had not resulted in publication. We then had an obligation to clarify the nature of both the allegations and our reporting. Yesterday, Fairfax was asked if he believes the governor's team is spreading misinformation about him.
I don't know precisely where this is coming from. We've heard different things, but here's the thing. Does anybody think it's any coincidence that on the eve of potentially my being elevated, that's when this uncorroborated smear comes out? Does anybody believe that's a coincidence? I don't think anybody believes that's a coincidence. You don't have to be cynical. You don't have to understand politics to understand when someone's trying to manipulate a process to harm someone's character without any basis whatsoever.
Gene, to say this is a absolute chaotic mess is an understatement. And it's not just about Richmond. You had College of William and Mary disinviting
the governor
from coming to come
now,
to a
this is Virginia, steeped in history. Washington, Jefferson, Madison, and so for the College of William and Mary, the second oldest university, which takes it very seriously, to disinvite the governor is a huge deal.
And the University of Virginia's their
president
now
had a
criticizing him as well. And yet we're in a situation where you have a cloud hanging over the lieutenant governor now, an allegation from 2004.
It's a mess all around. I mean, as far as the governor is concerned, he has been abandoned by every major Democrat and most Republicans, except those who are, crying crocodile tears right over the political difficulty the Democrats are in. But he's been totally abandoned, and he's all alone. He has no real support. So it is not viable for him to continue as governor, in my view. I don't see how
But then what happens next? He steps down. The lieutenant governor comes in.
Right.
And then the same calls will come for the lieutenant governor to resign if this woman continues to come forward. I guess.
Right. The lieutenant governor Justin Fairfax, was and is, we'll see, a complete rising star in Virginia politics, who has a fascinating history. His name, Justin Fairfax, as in Fairfax County. His ancestors were enslaved on the Fairfax, Lord Fairfax's
It's an incredible
plantation.
story.
It's an incredible story when he was sworn in as lieutenant governor, the second African American to hold that office after Doug Wilder. He had his great-great-great-grandfather's manumission papers in his pocket.
We've read the stories. It's extraordinary moving, but can the same party that said that Brett Kavanaugh couldn't sit on the United States Supreme Court because of what he did in high school sit back and say, well, it's okay for this guy to be a lieutenant governor?
This is a party that has zero tolerance. Zero tolerance
so what
in the Me Too era. So this will be litigated in the court of public opinion, I believe, which is in itself a disaster given the nature of the allegation. But that's what's going to happen.
You know, we need more information, I think, on this. I do think we have a lot of information when it comes to the governor. And politicians survive scandals. President Trump has, President Clinton did. You need your base to stick with you. The governor's
His news conference was the self-inflicted final straw.
That's right. It doesn't matter if that picture depicts him. He now says it doesn't. He acknowledged wearing blackface and impersonating Michael Jackson as an adult when he was an adult. But we don't know yet where the story with the lieutenant governor is going to lead us. I think we do need to know more before we can assess whether he can maintain the support of his political.
And by the way, only by the grace of the First Lady of Virginia was the governor stopped from moonwalking at a press conference, which was an astonishing
She
moment.
could not stop him.
Incredible.
She could not stop him from giving pro tips on putting black shoe polish on your face.
Just put a little on because it's so hard to get
Just a little.
off.
He said anybody who's ever done this before, right? And so this guy was accused during the campaign of being a bag of mulch by Democrats who were upset that he was not doing better than he was doing. I think that may have actually been an insult to a bag of
the news conference was
and yet his position is it was not me in that photograph. Here I am telling you about the Michael Jackson blackface and the moonwalking, but it's not me in that photograph. I'm not going anywhere. The question is, how long is that a sustainable position everyone in the Democratic
It's not sustainable. The whole context of that press conference, too. I mean, at one point he continued to kind of imply that, well, it was just a time, it was 1984, right? And so who knew that blackface was racist?
We all knew in 1984.
But I think the reason you have Fairfax, Lieutenant Governor Fairfax now saying, or at least intimating, that the governor's team may have had a hand in sort of getting this story back out in the public, is it gives the governor some breathing room. Because you now have, to Joe's point, some questions around the successor.
And listen, and here's a problem.
That slows this process down.
It does.
This young woman, this woman now comes, she's no longer a young woman, but this woman comes out and is more public in her testimony. I understand she's, by reporting from the Washington Post, that she's gotten a lawyer now. So that means that there's some more legs to this potentially. And that, in terms of the Northam situation, slows the process down.
This appears like with Brett Kavanaugh, like that this story is being forced out, and that's uncomfortable.
But we can see where this is going. Most troubling for Fairfax is the fact that this woman actually voluntarily reached out to the Washington Post after he was elected and before the inauguration. So it does add complications. And what's so fascinating, and I am making fun of Northam and the way he handled himself in the press conference. I don't know if making fun is the right word. It was horrifying. And yet you read reports from Virginia that actually he was a pretty effective governor. That he worked with Republicans and Democrats, and expansion of Medicaid, getting a lot done.
And that's a problem. If you go talk, if there were a couple of man on the street interviews that were done, and it was interesting to hear people say that very same thing. He's been an effective governor. We like his policies. And they have found, or at least trying to find, some kind of way to create some space to not so much forgive him, but to not use that as the cudgel to sort of push him out. So there is, I think, the way Northam is looking at this is, if I have that kind of sort of pause in this process, to his point, it gives me a chance to go out and prove that the allegations aren't true. I don't know how you do that.
I don't know how, given the skills that he's shown.
I don't think you can
but I'm just
do
saying,
that.
that's-
But
I agree.
but the question
He
is,
doesn't even know what he doesn't know.
Right.
where do Democrats go from here, though, Susan? If you were looking at Northam leaving, and then you're looking at Fairfax stepping up and having a woman from 2004 with a lawyer accusing him of sexual assault against, again, the backdrop of last summer's Brett Kavanaugh hearings for a party that has zero tolerance, for a party that drove Al Franken out of town because he was accused that he denied the charges, that he placed his hands on women during pictures.
And this is a change in the space of, what, 2 years? That it is that there is zero tolerance. It is a reflection of how Democrats have viewed President Trump's presidency, that they will not allow someone who has behaved in an inappropriate way in the past to survive in the present.
Or someone who's been accused.
Just accused of. We're just talking about accused.
With Al Franken.
You can't actually say that Justin Fairfax behaved in an inappropriate way. You can't say that.
I don't think we know
you can
yet
say
what
he's
happens
accused.
to him. I agree.
Of course, but you have to say he's accused.
Yes.
He didn't.
You do.
Right.
We don't know that.
We can't say that.
Just not on
Same
public
with Brett
record at all.
Kavanaugh.
Just like
I'm
Brett-
sorry.
just like
We got to
Brett
speak
Kavanaugh.
English.
And by the way, it is important. Let's just stop. And I know Alex has told us to go to break 30 times.
Yeah.
It is important for us in the media to take a pause, because I know Mika was issuing these warnings very carefully during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. And every time she did it, she would...
Who I thought was unfit for the job, by the way.
She would get absolutely skewered, but she said,
We don't know.
Democrats, there is still something in America called due process. And if you overreach, you're going to pay. And my God, pay they did.
And I'm still at a loss with Al Franken. I'm just going to say it. I am. I understand why they think they had to do that. The Democrats, Kirsten Gillibrand, all those people who want to run for president and who have this zero tolerance policy, but they're all accused. I mean, tell me where we go from here on this one. That's the conversation with me too. Where do we go from here? Justin Fairfax, what if he's completely innocent? What if he didn't do this?
Right.
Yeah.
And what if he did? And
Right.
who are we to say?
But the marker has been laid down.
hard.
The standard is believe women. And if you believe women, you've got to listen to this woman's story. And so maybe she'll come out publicly and tell her story. And here's a radical thought. We should follow the facts of the case rather than making up our minds.
And let's see if she. I mean, we have not heard the story.
No.
We really have not heard the story.
Right.
We don't know. Virginia is totally ill-equipped to deal with this, right? Governors only serve 1 4-year term. They can't be reelected. They don't know how to do impeachment. They don't know what to do if you can't go.
My God, it's a
we
nightmare.
don't know that in Virginia. I mean, they just don't know.
White House Counselor Kellyanne Conway also weighed in on the Northam controversy yesterday. Here it is.
The president has said he just thinks it's unforgivable, it's unconscionable. Or you can go back to his tweet and his words that this person apologized and then said, gee, it wasn't me, I didn't do it.
Yeah, someone else who said
It's
that.
breathtaking, really.
Someone else who said, gee, it wasn't me. That would be President Trump, who once apologized for the Access Hollywood tape, but later, according to the New York Times, quote, began raising the prospect with allies that it may not have been him on the tape after all. Okay. Still ahead, new polling shows 43% of Americans would like to see President Trump face a primary challenger heading into 2020. But Trump's campaign is reportedly taking steps to make sure that doesn't happen. Morning Joe is coming right back.
Are you still able to move?
Inappropriate circumstances.
My wife says inappropriate circumstances.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.